going on, guys? How's your guys' day going? Hope you're having a good day. I'm having an okay day. Thank you for asking. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I've had a new idea that I want to try and see how it does. And see how you guys respond to it. And it's not going to be, what would you say? It's not going to be a very normal, I guess, really. That's the only way to put it. It's not going to be normal. It's not going to be a normal video. It's not going to be too different from how I do my previous videos, but it'll be different enough. And it's definitely not, at least what I would say. I don't think it's going to be anything that I've seen on YouTube. And specifically because the goal is not to have an answer. That's like, you would call it a series, where basically these videos are going to be about a topic, but the goal is not necessarily to have an answer. Like, if you have an answer, whatever, like, you have an answer, that's great, but that's not the goal, right? So if you're confused, or if you feel like you're not getting it, that might be better than what you might think. That might be a good thing, actually. To allow you to brainstorm and allow you to think with me, right, about whatever the topic might be. Because, the reason being, I don't think that what our problem is more answers or even better answers. I think we need to have better questions. Because that's how I think of answers. I don't know about you, but when I think of answers, I think of them as lack of a better question. Like, that's all an answer is to me. An answer is nothing more than lack of a better question to ask. Because if you have an answer to something, that just means that you have yet to ask a better question. And, take that with a grain of salt, of course. Obviously, there are certain circumstances and there are certain scenarios in which an answer is fine or good or whatever you might want to call it. But when it comes to more abstract things, which is usually what I deal with, I usually don't like to deal with very, very, I guess you could say, like, digestible, right? Like things that are just, like, at first glance, you kind of already know, or you can already kind of form a thought about something. I like to deal with things that are a little bit more subtle. And so that's basically what this new series is going to be about. It's going to be somewhat similar, where we take a topic and we just talk, right? We just talk it out and see where we go. But instead, it's not going to be a thing. It's going to be thoughts. And so, for example, today's topic is going to be this thought that I've been circling, and the question is what's leaving it unfinished. And that question is, when does speaking become dishonest? And it might sound surface level, it might sound simple, right? But I don't mean it in the sense that, like, at what point do you start, or at what point is a lie a lie? That's not what this is. What I mean is, at what point, when we are speaking in general, regardless of what it is we're talking about or who we're talking to, at what point do we start to become dishonest to ourselves? Or, obviously dishonest to the other person as well. And not in a way where you're trying to manipulate, but rather the words that you're speaking are not true to what it is either you or the thing is. And that might just sound like, well, I don't know any better, so I say what I think, and then I might have an idea of what it is, right? Like, that sounds like all it is just trying to get as close as you can. But there's a very distinct difference, at least I feel. I feel as though there's a big, big difference between people speaking so much so that we become dishonest, and then people just trying to find, quote unquote, find an answer. And it's not meant to make sense, by the way. This whole topic, it's really not. There's not supposed to be like a cohesive understanding, or even just a guideline, or like a line of reasoning even. And that's why I like it, though. That's why I like thoughts like these. That's why I like engaging with these types of ideas, is that it's almost like if you're cooking and you have to learn each and every single ingredient's purpose without being told beforehand. Kind of similar to that, right? Where we take something and we let it do its thing. We don't try to place meaning on it before it's told us what it is, right? And this might sound very pseudo-intellectual. I can understand that, how it might sound like I'm just grasping at nothing, right? Like what's my point, or like well, what's the meaning behind it? But again, that really is what makes it, at least I think that's what makes it so beautiful. And so anyways, that's enough explaining. I find myself thinking about it a lot, where, like, an example would be, I'm talking to someone about something, and how I'm choosing to approach the topic is not dishonest because I'm not well versed enough, but dishonest because just of the predisposed thoughts that come when even trying to talk about something. Like, typically something very, very vast, something very, very beyond us, I guess you could say. Right? Like, the way that I think, or the way that I guess restrain myself from stepping outside of myself, is by not just taking my time, but asking myself if I even have enough of an understanding to ask questions at all. Because, like, so another example, like, let's say you're at if you've ever seen interviews, about, you could say like Jordan Peterson. He was a really good example, where people were pressuring him about his belief in God, right? They kept asking him, over and over, oh, do you believe in God? Do you believe in God? Do you believe in God? And he was taking his time to give his answer. He didn't want to give his answer because he was not he did not have the confidence to be able to answer that, which is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I was more interested in was the fact that the interviewers were so confident that they knew the topic, or him, or anything to do with it, that they thought it was okay to even ask that question. I hope that makes sense, because it's a very important thing, being able to ask good questions. And so when we just start blabbering and we just start saying anything and asking any question, despite the fact that we have no idea what it is that we're asking, it dilutes the whole purpose of the conversation. And so I too do that. I ask questions from the perspective as if I even know enough to ask a question at all. And so I try to take more time. To not just gather, knowledge. It isn't like just having a bunch of books and then I ask a question. It's being in the place where you're confident enough, and not necessarily certain, but confident, right? You're just confident enough to even begin down a path of, I guess, curiousness, really. And, because there's a difference. There's a difference between being curious and just just trying to force your own predisposed mentality onto something, because it's very hard to like go backwards, right? Like once you start thinking about something, and once you start to ask questions and you start to go down a path, typically you're not going to go back. You're typically not going to go back and, restart all over again, right? It's very easy to continue down that path. And then I feel as though that's what causes us to become misguided, or to lose the sense of what it is we're even after in the first place. And so I feel as though like when I become dishonest, when I speak too much, right? Like kind of ironic, like how I am right now. But, exempt. This would be an exemption. Because this is more supposed to be like a brainstorming thing. But rather, when I'm talking to people, I feel very dishonest when I'm talking to people. Because I feel like I'm trying so hard to fill the space of confusion in hopes that they'll even grasp just like, like a rice grain of what it is I'm trying to say. And in that attempt to try to make them or help them understand, I've diluted what it is I'm even talking about. Or I've given up truly trying to go all the way, if that makes sense. Right? Like you want someone to understand so bad that you tell them the little bits, you give them little bits of information hoping they'll understand, but then you don't try to explain sorry, you can't see my hand. You don't try to explain the rest, when that is what you were trying to explain. You weren't trying to explain to them the little bits, you wanted to explain to them the rest. And it's very similar to, I can never remember how to say it, but there's a word and it starts with a P. It's like Pandor? I don't know. I can't remember. I'm too lazy to look it up. But basically it's when you're teaching someone something and you have to minimize what it is you're teaching so that they can comprehend. So like, for example, school, like when you're in high school and you're learning about a topic, and then you go to college and you're learning about that same exact topic, your professor's more than likely going to teach you more or teach you something different that your high school teacher wouldn't teach you. And the reason being that the high school teacher has to make it easier for you to be able to understand. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but I feel like when you do that, at least when I do, I don't know about you, but when I do that in my day-to-day life, when I'm just talking to people, I feel like I'm being dishonest. And not because because I'm like not sharing all of my information with them, but because what it is that I'm trying to tell them has not even been articulated yet. And so there's many examples, right? That's just one of the many examples when speaking can become dishonest, or when does speaking, I don't want to be certain. That's the whole point. I don't want to finalize anything, but that's one of the many examples of when it can look like, or what it could look like. But it looks different for everybody, I feel like, because I feel like for a lot of other people, what I noticed is that they become dishonest from letting the audience speak for them, right? Like there's plenty of people out there who claim to know a lot of things and they speak about a lot of things, and they come from the perspective that there's someone to be trusted, but a lot of what they are doesn't come from them. It comes from the audience. It comes from their followers. It comes from the people who, are speaking for them. And it's like, well, you're not, that's a very dishonest thing, because you're not even letting that person, the person who they're following, speak for themselves. But I think that they know that. Like, there's a lot of influencers that know that. They know that their just following will make up for any type of confusion, so that they don't have to explain, right? Because all the people will just speak for them. Like, oh, whatever. It's not. I don't really have to explain these things because I see people in the comments all the time talking about this, or I see people on Twitter who are using, talking about me, and then they'll say something like this. And so it's like, well, yeah, like, sure, they're speaking, but that's your job. Your job is to be the one to say what you think, not let them speak for you. And so it could be like that. There could be numerous examples. Or even, like, it's kind of similar to the influencer thing, but just like, public speakers, or people who even, like, publish books. There comes a certain point where I feel everybody is willing to, I guess, dilute what they really think, knowing that it'll reach more people. So it's kind of similar, but it's not the same thing. Where, like, for example, if you wanted to write a book and it's very, very specific and niche, that's only going to reach that very specific niche community. So instead, you make it less specific and less niche, hoping that more people will buy it. Like, I feel like that's a dishonest thing that we do a lot, or that we see a lot even. And so, these might come across as, again, like, pretentious. This might come across as just like I'm grasping at nothing, I'm grasping at air. But I hope that we can continue to do this as a series, and that it gets more and more interesting. Because I feel like I have a lot of thoughts like this, where I want to leave them unfinished. I want to leave them kind of like when you're like when from dirt goes to mud, Like, I want to leave it in the dirt stage. I don't want it to progress just yet, because I want to see what more there is. And so I hope that you guys are able to contribute and ask questions, or even topic ideas. Let me know what you think down below. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a good rest of your day.